Hey everybody, it's GauntletX and welcome back to some more Magic Arena, and today we'll be playing some Historic Brawl in the Festival event, where we get to spend 2,500 gold or 500 gems, play as much as we want, and get 5 card styles for our first 5 wins. They're all pretty sweet, showcase card styles based on the team-up legends in the March of the Machine set, so pretty cool stuff there. But without further ado, let's show off the Historic Brawl deck we'll be playing today. So here's a look at the Historic Brawl deck that I'll be playing for today's event. The commander is going to be Brudiclad, Telchor Engineer, a 6-mana blue and red 4/4 that is going to give all our creature tokens haste, spit out a 2/1 token at the beginning of combat on our turn, and then make all of our tokens become a copy of any target token we control. And that is permanently, so there's a lot of really fun things you can do with Brudiclad and a lot of different cards that you can run in the deck to play around with that effect. Mainly you're going to be dumping a bunch of different kinds of tokens on board and making all of your tokens the copy of whatever you need to win the game. You can make a bunch of treasure tokens or clue tokens or food tokens or 1/1 tokens or 2/1 tokens, and then turn them all into maybe an 8/8 Kraken token with hexproof or something like that. So Brudiclad is a really fun commander with a ton of cards that synergize and combo very well with them. So this is a super sweet deck that's really fun to play around with, and there are tons of cards that would work really well in this deck that I'm not even running because there's just so many different token producers, so many different ways to play around with Brudiclad and build around with Brudiclad. So really cool commander that I highly recommend, but let's get into the 99 for this particular deck. So starting off at 1 mana, we have Hard Evidence, giving us 2 different tokens for only 1 mana. Nice little roadblock during the early game that can give us a bit of card draw as well. Dragon Master Outcast can spit out a very big dragon token to try to turn everything into a copy of late in the game, once we have 6 or more lands. Gleeful Demolition can be used on a treasure token, a clue token, a 1/1 token to turn it into 3 1/1 goblin tokens. That again is going to help us get that quantity up to have an even wider board state of whatever massive token we try to copy later on. Strike It Rich is a nice little mana ramp card that gives us 1 treasure token the first time we play it, and another one when we flash it back later, so that can ramp into getting Brudiclad out a turn early, or it can just leave some tokens behind. Retrofitter Foundry is a pretty flexible token producer for a deck that runs a certain amount of servo and thopter production already, so this has interesting effects where you can turn servos into thopters, then turn thopters into constructs, so pretty flexible card with a bit of other servo and thopter production. We have Lazotep Plating, which is an excellent protection spell, seeing as it is going to protect all of our permanents from any targeted removal for a turn, and give us a 1/1 zombie army token. The really cool thing about the zombie army is it's the first token we've shown so far that comes with a +1/+1 counter on it. So while it technically comes out as a 1/1 because it's a 0/0 with a +1/+1 counter on it, once we turn that token into something else, it will retain the +1/+1 counter and be like a larger version of a Thopter or a larger version of a Mirror. It'll still get that +1/+1 buff. So next up we have Mystic Reflection, which is a really fun combo with Brudiclad because we can make it so we cast a Mystic Reflection during main phase 1, choosing whatever non-legend on the board we want to turn our entire board into. Then we move to the beginning of combat. Brudiclad triggers, makes a 2/1 mirror, but that mirror is going to enter the battlefield as a copy of the creature that we chose, so we'll then have a copy of that creature that is a token, and then we can make all our tokens a copy of that token. So with this, we can turn all of our tokens into a copy of any non-legendary on board, which is a really fun combo. We've got Dragon Fodder and Krenko's Command and Ral's Reinforcements. Again, just to get that board state wide, spit out a bunch of tokens. Tilinali's Summoner is a nice mana sink to dump out a ton of tokens once we get that City's Blessing. If we don't have 10 or more permanents, we'll have to exile the tokens in the end step, but it is not hard for a deck that produces a bunch of tokens to end up with 10 permanents on the board. Enthusiastic Mechanaut can make all our artifacts cheaper. We're running a decent amount of them, and worst case scenario, this allows us to play Brudiclad a turn early. Third Path Iconoclast gives us some soldier tokens every time we're casting non-creatures. A little bit of mana ramp here between Arcane Signet and Mind Stone. Treasure Map is some flexible scrying and potentially mana ramp from flipping into giving us treasure tokens, and again, like everything else that gives us treasure tokens, we can use those twofold. We can use them to ramp into something early, or to just have more tokens on the board to turn into creatures. We've got Blue Sun's Twilight, which is hilarious if we get to cast it where X equals 5 or more really late in the game, because then we can gain control of our opponent's best creature and make a token copy of it, then turn all of our tokens into more copies of that creature with Brudiclad potentially. Stolen by the Fae is a nice tempo play. Toss something back into our opponent's hand and give us a bunch of fairy tokens to up our token count. Starting off at 3 mana, we have another sweet way to make our whole board copies of any creature we control. With Blade of Shared Souls, if we equip a token with this, or if we just still have the Rebel token that it comes with, and we make that token a copy of whatever creature we control, we can then use Brudiclad to make all of our other tokens copies of the same card. Chrome Host Seed Shark is excellent with Brudiclad. All Incubate cards are pretty great with Brudiclad, but Chrome Host Seed Shark is one of the most absurd, giving us an Incubator with X +1/+1 counters every time we cast a non-creature spell with mana value X. So of course, once we turn those incubators into anything else, they will be flipped immediately as just beefy creatures with +1/+1 counters on them. We've got Midnight Clock for more mana ramp, this one being a sweet one because it can also refuel you later in the game. Psy Master Thopterist can spit out some Thopters as we're playing other artifacts. Stern Lesson is really nice in the deck because it gives us a Power Stone token, along with being some decent instant speed card selection. That Power Stone can be used to cast Brudiclad a turn early, and can also turn into whatever token we're making everything a copy of. We have Cackling Counterpart and Quasi-Duplicate as 2 ways to copy anything, make a token of it, so then again make all our tokens a copy of whatever we're choosing. Then we have Fable of the Mirror Breaker. This is really good for a Brudiclad deck, but it's honestly just really good for any red deck. But first off, we get a 2/2 Goblin token. Whenever that token attacks, we get a treasure token. And then when we flip the Fable, we can make token copies of non-legendary creatures we control. So there's so many different ways to use the Fable of the Mirror Breaker excellently in this kind of deck. We then have Professional Facebreaker, potentially fueling us with some treasure tokens. Seize the Spoils, another bit of card draw that comes with some treasure. Urabrask's Forge can make some real beefy trample hasting Phyrexians later in the game, and we could make our whole board state a bunch of gigantic tramplers later. Portaling Outburst is 3 tokens on 1 card, which is excellent. Prismari Command is a nice, flexible piece of interaction. I'm not running a ton of interaction in this deck because I really like just going full-on synergy and just kind of playing solitaire against each other in Brawl. I'm not the most competitive player in that way, but the interaction that I do run tends to be interaction that works really well with the deck's themes and synergies, and Prismari Command certainly does, because it's interaction that we can use while also creating a treasure token. So we can blow up an artifact, make a treasure, or do 2 damage to any creature or planeswalker and make a treasure. So pretty nice for that. We have Saheeli Rai, which can, as the -2, create a copy of any artifact or creature we control. Then we can make all of our tokens copies of that. Saheeli Sublime Artificer is going to spit out a bunch of 1/1 servos as we're casting non-creature spells. Chief of the Foundry is going to buff all of our artifact creatures. The vast majority of tokens in this deck will be artifact creatures, so this can get a bunch of extra damage in. If we do just the really basic bread and butter way of doing things, we'll play Brudiclad, turn all of our 1/1 goblins or whatever into 2/1 artifact creatures. So with that, all of a sudden they're 3/2s instead. So Chief of the Foundry plays pretty well in there. Foundry Inspector, again, another card that lets us play Brudiclad turn early and potentially lets us dump some of these other cheap artifacts out even quicker. Palladium Mirror is a little bit of mana ramp, as is the Skyclave Relic. Skyclave Relic being particularly sweet because it's mana ramp that might give us some extra tokens later. We've got Whir of Invention for a pretty flexible tutor, searching our library for any artifact and putting it onto the battlefield, potentially getting some really important ones like Phyrexian Processor, that we'll get to later. That is the main one I think I'll be tutoring for in this deck. But at 4 mana now, we have Irenicus's Vile Duplication, get a copy of anything as a flyer and a non-legendary. So this can copy our commander, and then all of a sudden, we get 2 Brudiclad triggers, getting 2/2/1s every turn if we want to go super crazy. We've got Padim, Console of Innovation, giving all of our artifacts hexproof and potentially drawing some cards. Mainly, it's going to protect our really important cards like Brudiclad or Phyrexian Processor, stuff like that. We've got C Double to copy any spell or creature, and we get a token copy of any permanence if we're copying a permanent spell. So with this, it's going to be a rare case scenario, but it's possible that our opponent casts like a really good enchantment or artifact, and then all of a sudden we could turn all of our tokens into copies of that. You know, we don't have to choose creatures with Brudiclad, so pretty interesting. Urza's Command is a great card here. It's going to give us 2 tokens off of 1 card by making a Power Stone and a Construct. The Construct can be really large because we'll have a lot of artifacts on board, especially if we turn all of our artifacts, if we turn all of our tokens into constructs, then they all make each other bigger and they all attack in for 1,000,000. So some great tokens that we can get off of the Urza's Command. Whirler Rogue again, 2 tokens off 1 card. Big Score giving us 2 treasure tokens, letting us card draw. Jaxis is yet another way to copy whatever creature we want. Ortheon, Hero of Lavabrink, very similar, copy whatever creature we want. Hellrider adds a bunch of damage every time we're attacking our opponent, so we're going to have a lot of wide board states because of our cards like Krenko's Command, Rel's Reinforcements, all the token production, of course. So this adds to our damage as we're attacking with a really wide board state. Storm the Vault can give us some treasure tokens as we hit our opponents, and even more importantly, if we ever get 5 or more artifacts on board, not that hard to do in this deck, we flip this into the Vault of Catlacan, which adds 1,000,000 mana, adds mana equal to the number of artifacts we control, and that's going to give us enough mana to do whatever. Sometimes we could get to a position where we can both cast Brudiclad and Cure-Best the Sea God in the same turn, and just find a victory out of absolutely nowhere. Something like that. Then we have Karn, Scion of Urza. This is mainly just another way to get that very good construct token. Then we have Phyrexian Processor. We have to pay a bunch of life for this one, but if we pay just like 10 life, being able to spit out a 10/10 and then make all of our tokens 10/10s, usually enough to end the game real quickly. So Phyrexian Processor, very sweet route to victory in a Brudiclad deck. Reverse Engineer, some solid card draw because we can cast it for cheap by tapping some artifacts. Spell Swindle gives us a counter spell that can also spit out a ton of treasure tokens to have a bunch of tokens on board. Burn Down the House gives us a board wipe if things are going bad, while still synergizing well with the deck. When we're ahead, we just make some devil tokens. Goldspan Dragon, another excellent way to make treasures, and it makes all of our other treasure tokens better as well, which is great in a deck that makes quite a few of them. Shark Typhoon, we get to make a pretty big flying shark token whenever we want it, or maybe hard cast a Shark Typhoon late game. That's always fun to do. Sublime Epiphany can copy any creature on the board, and it's just a really massive, really powerful piece of late game interaction. Ancient Copper Dragon, honestly, probably overkill. But I can't resist because it's hilarious. If we hit somebody with an Ancient Copper Dragon, get somewhere between 1 and 20 treasure tokens, and then just use those treasure tokens to play a Brudiclad next turn. And then that's like, 1 to 20 copies of whatever token we want, which is massive. Wormcoil Engine, really sweet top-end card in general, but it also gives us a very nice Death Touch and Lifelinker that we could turn all our creatures into. Junkwinder, really nice in the deck. We can usually play it for super cheap, and it's going to keep locking down our opponent's non-land cards. So just locking down all their creatures to keep their board from blocking anything we're doing, so we can really get that Brudiclad swing for victory. And then last but not least, the card I've mentioned quite a bit, Cure-Best the Sea God, just another way to get a massive token to turn everything into. So those are all the non-land cards I'm running in this deck. Again, it's a very sweet archetype. Brudiclad's a really strong commander, and there's tons of things you can do with it. There are plenty of cards that I love that I'm not running in here just because there's so much we can do. You can play like Mirror Box and specifically go for copying legends if you want to do that. You can like Helm of the Host the Brudiclad. if you want to do some really weird, really wacky things. There's like Sharding Sphinx, lets you get a 1/1 flyer every time an artifact you control damages an opponent, which can give you more tokens, but that's a 6 mana card, so didn't want a boatload of those. So lots of really fun stuff to do with Brudiclad. This is really just scratching the tip of the iceberg here in what you can do with this kind of archetype. And then, of course, wrapping things up, we'll take a look at the mana base. We've got all of the classics. We've got one of each on-color channel land. Just really nice to have that flexibility if we're flooding out. One of each on-color cycling land. Again, if we're flooding out, we can discard those to draw a card. Pretty much all of the blue-red duals, all of the blue-red rares that are dual lands, and the artifact lands, because we have some cards that care about the number of artifacts we have on board. And then outside of artifact lands and mana fixing, we've got Inventor's Fair, which is excellent for any deck with a lot of artifacts. We can tutor out one if we need it, or we can just keep gaining life as this sits on the board. Spire of Industry is just really good mana fixing in any deck that's going to consistently have an artifact on board. And Treasure Vault could spit out a bunch of treasure tokens. So that's the mana base, that's the entire deck. Very excited to play around with this one. It's a really fun deck, and just a super enjoyable commander in general. Highly recommend playing around with Brudiclad, but without further ado, let's hop into the Historic Brawl Festival and see how the deck plays. Alright, here we are for game 1 with a really nice opening hand. We've got the good mana fixing here. We get to go Dragon Fodder turn 2, Fable turn 3. Start getting a treasure token every time this goblin attacks, and if we're really lucky and they don't have a good blocker for the goblin, we can even play the Professional Facebreaker the next turn, and guarantee we get some treasure tokens off that as well. So we're just going to have a wide board state with a ton of treasures and ramp into our big Brudiclad early. Our opponent is on Marrow-Gnawer. All of their rats have fear once that hits the board, so that is a commander that might actually want to play Facebreaker first to get the treasure immediately, attacking with both of these. They're playing a rat colony deck, basically. The commander is going to let all of their rat colonies be completely unblockable with the fear ability, and can start sacrificing the rat colonies to just make more and more rats, doubling them up every time. So this is like one of the gold fishing style decks. You just gotta see, can you outrace the swarm of rat colonies? And I think this hand certainly can. Certainly can here. I'm gonna just keep this goblin so that I have more tokens for when I flip the Brudiclad here. And then I think I'm just gonna flip Brudiclad next turn and go wild. I can make them all goblin shamans. So we just get like infinite mana here. Yeah, this should just be the game pretty much. I guess I'll take a really big hit, so if I don't kill them here, every rat, so 5, 10, 15 is what I take next turn. Alright, 15 is not dead, so I'll let them hit me for 15 next turn, and I'll be pretty okay with that. Mystic Reflection? Hold up a second. I can't afford to do that before Brudiclad resolves. That would be hilarious, though, make them all Facebreakers. But no, we'll make them all Goblin Shamans. Alright. All the mana in the world. Sure. So they take 10 damage, then they crack at me for 15 if they play their commander. And then we just defeat them next turn. Because I probably just leave all these tokens on board and allow them to turn into Goblin Shamans next turn. Because if our whole board makes a token when it attacks, then that's just like absolutely absurd. Our board is going to get doubled up every turn. I attack with 5, get 5 tokens. Then boom, now I have 10 to attack with, I get 10 tokens. Boom, I attack with 20, get 20 tokens. Yeah, this is, Brudiclad Fable the Mirror Breaker is a little bit absurd, I would say. A little bit absurd. You know what would be really rude? Let's just be as rude as possible, because it's hilarious. We'll kill them with rat colonies, because who can resist, honestly? Who can resist? They thought they had a lot of rat colonies. How about my 11? Or I guess 10? 5. Yeah, because there are 2 ones getting plus 9 plus 1 for my 9 other rats. Alright, well, that was wild. That was some absolute Brudiclad nonsense. A whole lot of that was just the power level of Fable, the Mirror Breaker reflection of Kiki Jiki in general, but yeah, Brudiclad, we got to show off 2 really hilarious things that Brudiclad can do. Copying the Goblin tokens to get all those treasures and have so many tokens on board was hilarious, and then we drew into the Mystic Reflection to make everything rat colonies. I could have even just not discarded C-Double if I'd noticed that earlier and just made a token copy of a rat colony with that instead, and then made them all rat colonies, but yeah, that's kind of a wild board state to end it, so that will be how we are going to get our first showcase card style, and it is going to be for Kogla and Yadaro from Ikoria, the 2 gigantic, well, there's plenty of gigantic kaiju-like monstrosities, but these are 2 of the most iconic, Kogla being kind of the King Kong, Yadaro kind of being the Godzilla, so that's the cute little kind of team up there. Super strong card, and a very cool card style. Alright, here we are against Will and Rowan, the Royal Scions themselves. Nice little card draw engine that can trigger anything that cares about drawing twice in 1 turn. Since you draw on the draw step, then you do the draw discard ability. And they can be really good for an aggressive deck, giving one of their creatures +2/+0 first strike and trample every turn. So that could be really scary. Keep the opener here. We got 2 islands and a storm-carved coast, which is fine. Treasure map to set things up. Awkward with the double red cards, but treasure map can help scry into the next red source or potentially give us some treasures. And I do immediately hit the mountain, so now we have perfect mana. Gleeful Demolition is the draw. Not really interested in doing that yet. Here's Umara Mystic, which is an alchemy card now. They made it different. I don't know what's different about this from the original, but I guess there's something. Let's just get 3 1/1s here. Probably play a Hell Rider next turn and just start jamming in. There's the Royal Scions. They're going to buff the Umara Mystic to hit for 3 in the sky. Drawn to a Hard Evidence, pretty excellent card, but let's go for the Hell Rider this turn. Just immediately hit the Scions for 6, which is pretty tempting. You know what? Nah, I'm just going to go entirely at their face. Let's just get some real face damage going here. They're down to 15. The Brash Taunter, which shoots me whenever it's dealt damage, so they can hit me for 3 if they block a Hell Rider with it. Could be painful, but what else is painful is a double Hell Rider triggers. So let's set that up, shall we? I think I'm just gonna make even more tokens here and get a bunch of goblins for the future. If they don't board wipe or kill us, they're definitely dead next turn. Oh my god, look at all those Hell Rider triggers. What is that, like 10 damage? They might just be dead right now. Oh my god, they are, probably. They block 1 Hell Rider, take 6? Oh my god. Yeah, duplicating a Hell Rider is super nasty. Well, could you imagine if we could Brudiclad the Hell Rider? Alright, that game ended a lot more quickly than I thought it would. I did not expect it to end right there, but double Hell Rider will do that to you, I guess. Wow. That's going to be our second victory. Let's check out our next card style. Next up is Errant Angiata, the blue-white flyers and blue-white flash build-around card. Very cool Picasso-style artwork. I think it's like Cubist or something like that, but yeah, super sweet-looking card with the new Capenna card styles. Alright, now we are against Ye Old Stick Fingers. Kind of a built-in self-mill engine. You spend X mana, you get to mill until you hit X cards. Until you hit X creatures. Be interested to see what they're doing. There's a lot of different ways to play around with your graveyard. So tons of different ways to build around old stick fingers. Like this hand quite a lot if they don't have much cheap interaction. If they don't have like cheap removal, Mechanaut into Foundry Inspector can lead to some really explosive plays, making all of our artifacts cost 2 less to be just tremendously cheap. There's old stick fingers where X equals 1 and they immediately hit a Death Bloom Ritualist as the mill. Let's play a mountain. Drop a Foundry Inspector and a Skyclave Relic, I think. Just going all the way to the ramp zone here. Poke for 2. Then next turn I could afford to play Brudiclad, but I don't have any tokens to copy yet. I'd rather play Wormcoil Engine first, probably. Ooh, Pelucranos Unchained. That's a 6/6. It can fight our things off. It's pretty nasty, pretty spooky. Yeah, I think I go Wormcoil Engine here. I guess Wormcoil's not that great against Pelucranos, because this prevents any damage that's dealt to it, and instead removes that many counters, so Lifelink doesn't work against it. So if they just use Pelucranos to fight Wormcoil Engine, then Wormcoil Engine dies, but we don't get any life. We do get the tokens, though, which would lead into a Brudiclad play, so I'm actually pretty okay with that. So I think I'll actually just go for the trade here and hope we can have Wormcoil Engine get its death trigger. And that will be our route to victory. Making a bunch of worms. What does that do? When it dies, search the library for a creature with lesser mana value, put it on the battlefield, tap, then shuffle. Ooh, they get any 5 mana value or less creature onto the board? That is terrifying. So they get whatever is perfect for this scenario. So if there's any creature that like destroys all artifacts when it enters the battlefield, that's probably what they're going to get. They wouldn't be able to kill my Skyclave Relic with that, but they'd be able to blow up all of my creatures. 5 mana value or less is a lot. That's a lot of options. Drana is going to be the choice that lets them keep reanimating creatures from their grave whenever they cast it. Ooh, a free Mind Stone? Free. Don't mind if I do. Let's play a Brudiclad, for sure. I guess I could play a Tillinolli Summoner as well. Got the mana. Let's go all lifelink. Worms. Since we're competing with a 2/2 right now. I guess the problem is once the Death Touch worm becomes a lifelink worm, I can no longer choose to get Death Touch later. But I think this should be fine. They're at 7 life. They are going to have to do something really explosive with Drana. They can get back Pelucranos, or Deathbloom Ritualist. Oh, it's got to be a non-legendary. Okay, I get to choose what they reanimate, but it has to be a non-legendary. Okay, so they only had 1 non-legendary, so they just get Deathbloom. Yeah, that's fine. Brudiclad's looking fine here. There's Gloom Shrieker for some graveyard reanimation. Old Stick Fingers dies since they took the last creature from their grave. And then we do our thing. Yeah, go to combat and they scoop them up. That is going to be game, grabbing our 3rd card style. And that is for Drana and Linvala. Pretty powerful flying vigilant 3/4. That artwork is stunning. That is wild stuff there. I love how creative the artists are allowed to get with a lot of these showcase card styles where they are really just not something you get to see on normal Magic cards, where it's very much, for the majority of Magic cards, especially creatures, supposed to be a very clear representation of just show me the 2 figures maybe doing something in an action pose or something, but this is very clearly just like much more visually striking than you would get normally. Yeah. What can I say? I love the artwork in this game. This time we're going to be against Obnixilis the Adversary, which can force us to discard cards or lose life, and can make some devils and gain them life when they have devils. Another Planeswalker commander. I'll just take the free mulligan here. That mana base was pretty bad. This is pretty good. Double blue and then a blue or red source. So the mana's looking good. We're not doing anything till turn 3, which is a bit slow, but probably fine. They're going to foretell a card. Could be like a Poison the Cup, destroy a creature and scry 2. Could be a Demon Bolt. They could be on the demon-themed deck. A Demon Bolt for 4 damage to any target. There's a Burnished Heart for some mana ramp for them. There's nothing to copy with the Blade, so it's either play a Saheeli to start getting servos, a Forge to start getting those, or Seize the Spoils to set up mana. I kind of want to just slam down an Urbrask's Forge and hope they don't get any artifact removal, and this could just make a really ridiculous board state by itself. I mean, not a ridiculous board state in that we have a wide amount of creatures, but that we're going to be attacking with later in the game a 5/1 trample and a 6/1 trample, and just the sooner we play the Forge, the stronger it is. I hope I remember how to order triggers correctly on Arena to get the Forge to make the Phyrexian, then we get to copy it with Brudiclad. Okay, definitely need to draw land or two, so I should just Seize the Spoils or Saheeli and Scry. Let's Seize the Spoils. Feels too late to go for Saheeli Sublime Artificer. Alright, land, that's exactly what I wanted. And let's poke for 2. So they probably have a Demon Bolt to just kill Brudiclad the turn I play it. And I don't have a lot of information, so there's no real reason to guesstimate that, but we are playing Historic Brawl, where flavor wins are definitely a thing. And I could see them just playing a lot of demons here. And a Demon Bolt as well. Demon Bolt is a 4 damage instant, 4 damage to a creature, Planeswalker. It's 3 mana to cast normally, but if you foretell it and exile it like this, then you can cast it later for only 1 mana. Poison the Cup is a foretell card that's 3 mana to destroy a creature, but if you foretell it, you can cast it for only 2, and you get to scry 2 when you destroy that creature. So those are the 2 cards I'm thinking of. Because Poison the Cup would be the black removal spell that is foretold, Demon Bolt being the red removal spell that's foretold, and those tend to be some of the most common to run up against. Out of black or red, out of blue you expect the Time Walk, the take an extra turn card a lot of the time. I think our opponent may have had something come up, they may have just left. I'm just gonna go for the Brudiclad and see what happens here. Because it seems like the game might just be ending here, they might have just left. If they didn't, Brudiclad probably dies here, but then we still get our Urbrask's Forge token to attack in for the turn. And we don't really have a great alternate play. Even if I knew that this is a removal spell, like my best play would then just be Saheeli Rai and Scry 1, I guess. But we can't really quasi-duplicate or Blade of Shared Souls with no other creatures on board right now. I guess I could post-combat Blade or quasi-duplicate to have a 3/1 trample, but that seems worse. And we're definitely not going to demolition our own Forge, so kind of the only line we have, Brudiclad or Saheeli Rai. Okay, so we do it this way, so this resolves, then Brudiclad resolves. Boom. Alright, so we can do that how I thought we could. Order the triggers correctly to turn the 2/1s into 3/1 tramplers. Next turn, turn the 2/1s into 4/1 tramplers, and keep going from there. So hey, even if our opponent left prematurely and we don't get to finish the game off, at least we learned something, which is Urbrask's Forge definitely works with Brudiclad. Alright, and that's going to be the 4th card style for us, which is Jeru and Hazoret, featuring the updated Amonkhet Invocation showcase style. I like it a good amount. I like it in paper quite a bit. It is a little weird. It's one of the wilder ones, one of the more border-centric ones rather than artwork-centric ones, but I think it's pretty cool. So, Not a bad style at all. Here we are now against Aluna, Apex of Wishes. They're playing Ghidorah, King of the Cosmos. But the idea is that they get to mutate onto one of their creatures and then just cascade into whatever their first non-land permanent is and just put it onto the battlefield for free. So really explosive stuff. The plan is going to be just cheating some kind of massive permanence into play. Ooh, they've got their own Strike It Rich to just cast Ghidorah as soon as possible, get that trigger. It's a Star of Extinction for them. Let's go Arcane Signet Dragon Master Outcast. I should have played the Snarl. I always forget how the Snarls works. I always forget how the Snarls work. And I end up playing them really poorly. Because they want you to play the Snarl first and then the basic. I'm so used to the check lands. Because I've been playing them forever, like Rootbound Crag, where you want to play your basics first and then play your non-basic. Alright, luckily I did draw another basic land, so that's going to help out quite a bit. I can go Mindstone, Treasure Map, and still Scry. Guess I might as well poke them for one. Pass the turn. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 mana. We'll have 6 mana for Brudiclad next turn, but I won't have any tokens to copy. I'll just get a single 2/1. Don't know if that's going to be super worth it. We'll probably play Goldspan Dragon instead. Try to start dumping a few tokens on board. So Escape to the Wilds, huge amount of card draw. Does pick them up a Time Warp that they get to cast next turn. They can cast any of these till the end of their next turn. Time Warp, a removal spell, draw spell, and a bunch of 3/3s. Alright, that's pretty good. They're probably going to Time Warp us. Blue Sun's Twilight. A lot of mana. And we don't get to make a copy of a legend, and it seems like their commander's like their only creature mainly. So let's dump that on the bottom. Let's go Fabled Passage. For an island. Drop the Goldspan and Midnight Clock here. And we'll see what they're going to do with their extra turn. But it's probably not going to be something that we like to see. Okay, well that wasn't bad at all. I guess their extra turn is just draw a card, untap the mana. There is the 0/1 plant they can now mutate Ghidorah onto. They might be a deck that has like one permanence, because everything we've seen so far has been instants and sorceries. So they might be digging for one specific card. Oh, they're a Thassa's Oracle deck? No, Omniscience is the one permanent. Wait, was it literally the bottom card of their library? That's a literal 1 in 100. They scoop it up. Oh my god, they're not a Thassa's Oracle. I was like, hold up. Their whole library just got exiled. Oh my god. Their whole library just got exiled, so they must just be running 0 permanents. But then I was like, no, because then Thassa's Oracle would be hit off of Ghidorah. They're running 1 Omniscience as the 1 permanent in the deck to guarantee that they hit it off of Ghidorah, and it was the literal bottom card of their library. Did they mulligan? And put it on the bottom? I don't think so. No, they shuffled! They shuffled with a Fabled Passage! And that was after the Abundant Harvest? Yeah, there was nothing that put something on bottom of their library since they shuffled Omniscience to the literal bottom of their library. The odds are so monumentally low. We lose that game handedly if Omniscience is at anywhere other than like the bottom 2 cards of their library, maybe. That is so funny. So yeah, their game plan is to get Omniscience out every game for free, and then they can just cast everything in their deck from then. You know, cast these really high mana value haymakers, just go Time Warp, just go card draw, cast Glistening Dawn, Brotherhood's End, a bunch of big massive stuff to close out the game. And I guess we're just truly whitelisted today. And Omniscience just gets shuffled to the bottom of their library with their Fabled Passage. Oh my god. Well, that is a way to end the Historic Brawl today. That is very in spirit to the kind of wild nonsense the format is all about, and we're going to run away with our Inga and Essica partner card style here, or team up card style. Very cool card style, especially love the borders on this looking like an old like Viking boat or Viking ship with the dragons in the corners and stuff, so very cool stuff. Nice to get all these card styles out of the event, and nice to play some more Historic Brawl. Brudiclad did some really funny, really wild things in a few of those games. The wildest thing, of course, being able to make our whole board rat colonies to beat our opponent down with. That was probably the coolest thing we did. But double Hellrider victory was nice as well. Quasi-duplicating that Hellrider was super, super sweet. And then the funniest and coolest thing to happen today had nothing to do with our deck. It had to be Ghidorah exiling our opponent's entire library. That is MVP. Omniscience, the MVP card of the day. But yeah, had a really good time with today's video. I hope you all enjoyed the video as well. At the end of today's video, as always, I'd like to thank my patrons very much for supporting the channel, as well as thanking you for watching the video. If you're interested in seeing more, you can always like, comment, and subscribe to let the YouTube algorithm know to send you more in your recommended feed. If you'd like to catch me live, you can check out the Twitch channel in the link in the description below. And if you'd like to support the channel directly, you can check out the Patreon link in the description below. Other than that, as always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again soon for some more Magic Arena.